Hi, this is Doug Pinkham from the Public Affairs Council. Today I want to talk about an area of expertise within public affairs that I believe is really underappreciated. And this topic is risk communication. It's how the public perceives danger, what makes them afraid, what makes them feel safe, and how it's reflected in corporate speak and in public policy. And I'm then going to give an example of how I think it's misapplied by both political parties, and that topic will be climate change. First, let's talk a bit about risk. What makes people afraid? Studies of the brain have indicated that there are certain factors that when we hear them spoken to us or we read information, tends to make us feel a sense of scariness. These tend to be situations where the risk is man-made, not a force of nature, where the risk is unfamiliar, perhaps genetically modified food, where people feel a lack of control about the risk. This is why some people are afraid to fly because they're not the pilot. If the risk is imposed on them by someone else, if it directly affects them, this is extremely important and something that public policy makers often forget. People are also afraid if they feel that the risk particularly affects children, or if the source of the risk, perhaps a big company or a government official, is distrustful, then they feel the risk is worse. And finally, if the risk is considered gruesome. This is why people are afraid of shark attacks, even though statistically speaking, the potential impact of shark attacks is not exactly a public health crisis. So now I said I was going to talk about climate change. Well, let's look at historically how the Democrats and how the Republicans have talked about the subject of climate change. The Democrats have taken the approach for a long time that the science proves that climate change exists. It's a long-term intergenerational risk we all face. We need to address it to keep the oceans from rising, to prevent the extinction of polar bears, to help people on the coast. And it's something that we need to do for future generations. I personally feel they would be more effective if they said, look, what strategies we would use to deal with climate change are frankly the same strategies we would use to reduce dirty air and improve air quality. Because no one wants their grandchildren with lung conditions, coughing to breathe air, like in Beijing and other parts of China, where people have to wear masks on very smoky days. This is visual, it affects people because it deals with children, that affects everyone, not just people living on the coast. So if they were to take this approach, I think it would resonate, frankly, with more people in the American public. On the other side of the equation, I think that the Republican Party has done an especially bad job of talking about climate change, because in many cases, Republican leaders have said either that it doesn't exist or that much of it is frankly not man-made. Now let's analyze for a moment the problems with that point of view. Number one, you can come off as being anti-science, which is not necessarily a good thing. You've also taken yourself out of the debate over strategy, because frankly, many democratic ideas for dealing with climate change don't pass the laugh test in terms of affordability and practicality. Some of them are very good ideas, but there's no counterweight because Republicans are saying in many cases that the problem either doesn't exist, we can't do anything about it, or it's not necessarily created by people. Republicans would be smarter in the situation to say we too want to have clean air for our grandchildren and we're committed to work with everyone to achieve that. However, we need to spend at least as much time getting ready to adapt to climate change as in actually trying to prevent it. We are for policies to deal with it that are practical and affordable, and they need to pass those two tests. In addition, every country in the world needs to step up and contribute. This can't just be the United States of America. Now, if the Democrats took that position about air quality, the Republicans took that position acknowledging climate change exists, but we're not using the right strategy, guess what? The politics would frankly be a lot easier. And we would be talking about tactics for actually dealing with the problem and perhaps actually making it a better world, one in which the air is clean and we're actually dealing with the problem at hand. So that's a good example, I think, of why risk communication is so important, whether you're a corporate person or whether you're in the business of making policy.